area and the world. Progressive radio for the metropolitan New York area and the world. Now we're going to dive into the case of the recently liberated Lynne Stewart. She is home, out of Carswell. This is CPRmetro.org. And we're going to start with a piece that we played. I played it yesterday or the day before, I think the day before yesterday, but I'm going to run it again as context. It's a discussion that took place by members of the New Jersey Bar and other lawyers, including a lawyer who was formerly the prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, which is the office that prosecuted Lynne under John Ashcroft, and all the way up through Eric Holder. And the attorney's name is Andrew McCarthy. He was a contributing editor to the National Review back in 2005 when he wrote an article about Lynne, sort of backhanded compliment, but the essential compliment being extremely germane to the case, saying that her word was gold in all the dealings that he had from across the table with her as a prosecuting attorney. And he's like a pretty heavy-duty right-winger if you read the piece. The piece is called, for those who are interested, I don't know, it's from, if you go to nationalreview.com, it's from February 15th, 2005. It's on his letterhead, actually. And just type in Lynne Stewart in the search engine there. And they went after her bad. I mean, they even went after her kids in 2007. One was a teacher. They were looking at her attendance sheet and looking at sick notes that her other daughter had written, who's a doctor. Really, I mean... But, these people are not above pettiness. In any event, we're going to start with this discussion, and then we're going to go right to a series of different recordings that we have from the time that Lynne was called by the courts to say, come on down, it's time to start doing time, back in November of 2009, up through late yesterday when she was released. We've got all kinds of goody stuff, but we can start with this discussion of some of the material aspects of the case, and it's a very interesting one in terms of context for the things that happened later, which we're going to go into in a little detail as we go through this. And here we go. This is from a program sponsored by the New Jersey Bar.
Background of representing all of these persons that the government has declared to be enemies, so some of them very successfully, and so I was ripe for the picking, as they might say.
She made her reputation on representing radicals. Now Lynne Stewart herself is facing prison. The government says she broke the law on behalf of this convicted terrorist. Should she be disbarred, even in prison? And what's the message here to the criminal defense bar?
Her conviction met with both cheers and outrage as a federal jury found her guilty of giving support to a terrorist conspiracy. After nearly 30 years as a people's lawyer and a lifetime as a political radical, Lynne Stewart may be headed to prison. Should she have been prosecuted at all? Should she be locked up for the rest of her life? And what are the implications for the criminal defense bar? I'm Raymond Brown, and we're talking today about a case that has split the legal community, as we'll see here in the studio. But first, Sandy King with a look at the woman who's created all this furor.
Raymond, she is the grandmother of 14, a breast cancer survivor who is used to being in the trenches. But now the fight is for her own survival. So Lynne Stewart is contesting her conviction as the government appeals her 28-month sentence, still insisting she should get 30 years. Martyr to the cause of freedom?
Front page of the freaking paper, Lynne Stewart!
Or tool of the terrorists?
Lynne Stewart! This
enemy of the state.
was conspiring with a freaking terrorist, Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman!
Just look her up on YouTube, where anyone can post practically anything, and you'll find a lawyer as loathed.
Now this lawyer who aided and abetted the terrorists
as she is loved. But is it roses that Lynne Stewart deserves? Or is it life in prison?
She received her day in court. She had every opportunity to make whatever arguments needed to be made on her behalf. The case went to a jury, and the jury decided. That's the American way.
And 30 years of virtual life sentence was what Lynne Stewart faced when a federal jury in Manhattan found her guilty.
In ordinary times, this would not have been a criminal case. But these are not ordinary times.
Guilty of violating national security by carrying messages from a notorious convicted terrorist, Omar Abdel-Rahman, once based in Jersey City and dubbed the Blind Sheikh, held incommunicado in a federal prison. The government said her knowing acts to get his word out amounted to no less than treason.
The fact that it's in the context of terrorism just compounds, again, a visceral negative reaction both from the public and from the prosecution.
So after 3 decades as a lawyer, her reputation based on her representation of radicals and revolutionaries, Lynne Stewart herself was looking at life.
I have this background of representing all of these persons that the government has declared to be enemies, so some of them very successfully, and so I was ripe for the picking, as they might say.
And it was all a far cry from the fresh-faced small-town girl who traded in the safe life as a school librarian for the passion and perils of a people's lawyer, one who'd come to the people's law school to learn her trade.
I think she came to law school because of who she was, because of her attraction to Arthur Kenoy, his commitment to protecting the poor, the powerless, the disadvantaged minorities.
And at Rutgers, it was Arthur Kenoy, a civil rights icon who had even represented the Rosenbergs, who was her inspiration.
I said, I can be a lawyer, I can go to court, I can be one-on-one with these people, I can do some good, I can at least rescue one at a time.
But as a lawyer, she found a mentor in the lightning rod, Bill Kunstler, who shared her politics, her practice, and her activist approach to their controversial cases and clients.
And we're not lawyers who will reveal secrets, and we don't even know them.
You really have to have something in the stomach for it. You have to want to do it. It's not enough to think, oh, this would be fun.
So when she agreed to defend the dreaded Sheikh, charged with plotting to bomb New York landmarks, linked by the government to the first attack on the World Trade Center, it was with her usual fervor.
He really was a tremendously charismatic person.
And even after Abdel-Rahman was tried and convicted, locked away in isolation, Stewart continued to visit, agreeing she admits to strict government rules, restricting his communication to the outside world.
And so the government's allegation is not just that she was the conduit or assisted in carrying messages from her client to others outside the prison, but that she specifically violated the agreement that she had signed with the government.
But she insists that when she broke the rules, even talking to reporters on his behalf, it was not, she says, in support of his cause, the alleged violent overthrow of the government in Egypt.
I would love to practice again. I said in my letter to the judge before sentencing, I said, the worst punishment is not being able to practice, to be in front of a courthouse at 9 o'clock in the morning and not be part of that. That is the hardest.
I think that what happened here was that she's a perfect example of the public seeing the lawyer as the alter ego of the client. And having been perceived that way even prior to the allegations, and being a very vehement defender of an alleged terrorist caused her to get into the trouble that she did.
A person who has done so many good works, should she be deprived of liberty for the rest of her life because she lost her sense of judgment for a moment?
And in the end, the judge said no, rejecting the government's call for 30 years, sentencing Lynne Stewart to 28 months.
This is a great victory against an overreaching government, and I thank all of you for that victory. You all had a part of it. You all are part of me. Thank you. We the people are the power! We the people are the power!
In her letter to the judge before she was sentenced, Lynne Stewart wrote, "I am not a traitor. The government's characterization is inaccurate and untrue. It takes unfair advantage," she went on, "of the urgency and hysteria that followed 9/11. And the sheikh had been convicted of plotting terrorist acts against the U.S. But the target of those messages that Lynne Stewart helped get out were aimed not at America, but at the Mubarak regime in Egypt. Stewart has enthusiastically embraced many causes throughout her life, but that, she says, Raymond, wasn't one of them.
And when we come back, Stewart's one-time adversary in the case against the sheikh, a counterterrorism consultant, and a Stewart supporter from the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. So stay with us.
Lynne Stewart, she's the one who represented the individuals from the Middle East, is that correct?
She was the one who was convicted for supposedly aiding the guy with terrorist connections.
She was the lawyer for the blind sheikh.
Is she the jailed lawyer? I think it had to do with relaying information from the person she was representing from the jail.
She got in a lot of trouble because apparently she unwittingly or wittingly passed information to some other group or something like that, terrorist related.
I don't know who she is. Should I?
She is Philadelphia DA, perhaps?
I have no clue who that is, to be honest.
Well, she was convicted, I think, of treason. I'm not so sure of the specific counts, but I know she's serving time for aiding and abetting terrorism, I think.
So even at Rutgers Law School, where we did those interviews, Lynne Stewart wasn't all that well known. But lawyers know exactly who she is, and chances are they have some strong feelings. We'll get an idea of just how strong from Andrew McCarthy, who led the prosecution of the blind sheikh, from David Gartenstein-Ross, counterterrorism consultant and author of My Year Inside Radical Islam, and in Newark, from Marvin Schechter, past president of the New York State Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Welcome to all of you. A bit of disclosure, I'm the former president of the New Jersey Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and a former board member of the National Association, though I was not involved with the briefs filed in this case. Marvin, let me start with you. An obvious question would be, do you think that this prosecution should have been brought at all, and if not, why not?
Well, it shouldn't have been brought at all, because in the final analysis, what Lynne Stewart really did was issue two very public press releases, one in 2000 and another one immediately after that, clarifying a statement made by the sheikh concerning a ceasefire that his followers were following in Egypt against that government. It was that press release and the subsequent one which were the violation of certain rules and regulations that she had signed as a lawyer.
Let me ask you to clarify it. She had signed an agreement saying that she would not communicate in that way. Is it your view that those agreements should not be binding, or that the law is bad, or that discretion was improperly exercised to bring about this prosecution?
Well, I think the discretion to bring about the prosecution was improperly exercised. The way to have really handled that was to engage in an administrative procedure which would have had far-reaching consequences for Ms. Stewart's access to her clients, not only the sheikh, but even entering federal jails, and would have sent a very harsh message to the entire criminal defense bar. Attorneys are very sensitive to these kinds of things. But to then elevate a public press release, two of them, into a material support for terrorism case seemed to me not only overreaching, but just, overkill
Let
in this
me
case.
ask David, who's busily shaking his head no, whether you agree that it was overreaching to prosecute, and whether administrative sanctions for violation of those SAMs, the regulations governing what lawyers can say, would have been more appropriate.
I don't agree that it was overreaching to prosecute, and I think that one thing Marvin glosses over is what precisely these press releases were. They weren't just press releases that were clarifying something concerning a ceasefire. They were press releases which showed definitively, when Sheikh Omar's supporters were skeptical, that he wanted to end Jamaat Islamiyah's ceasefire with the Egyptian government. Now, it's important to understand what Jamaat Islamiyah did when they weren't under ceasefire. In 1997, a number of Jamaat Islamiyah members went into the temple of Hatshepsut in Luxor, Egypt, and murdered 58 foreign tourists as well as 4 Egyptians. Now, that was particularly, it stood out particularly for me because I'd been in that temple 2 weeks before. door. I mean, it's a major tourist attraction. You have an area where you're walking through the temple. There's no exit. They went through and slaughtered everybody. Like, this is a group, what they did is no secret.
But the predicate involves, Andrew, the fact that the defendant or the convicted person, the sheikh, was held incommunicado. Right. And that at least Lynne Stewart's lawyer has argued that she had a lawyer-related reason for talking about the sheikh and issuing a press conference. That is, to keep his case alive, to hopefully put pressure on the government to change its view about whether he should go back to Egypt. So, without regard to whether you agree that the strategy was sound or not, why would these competing interests not result more effectively in an administrative sanction as opposed to a criminal sanction, the issue Marvin's raised?
First of all, it's not lawyer work at all. People need to realize that by the time this all happened, the blind sheikh had had his trial, he had had his appeal, his time to appeal to the Supreme Court had run, and his time to file habeas corpus petitions attacking his conviction had run. He was no longer an accused under the First Amendment, and she was no longer acting in the role of a traditional defense lawyer. So you have that on one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, you have the fact that this particular defendant is one of the worst terrorists, worst defendants who's ever been prosecuted in the United States. He's the person who Osama bin Laden says gave the fatwa that authorized the attacks of September 11th. So to me, it's no contest. You have somebody who's not acting as a lawyer, who's enabling one of the worst offenders that we've ever had in the history.
She must have been acting as some kind of a lawyer because the government required her to sign agreements as a lawyer to go see her client as a lawyer. So I'm not quite sure that that kind of analogy holds true. And to say that her lawyerly obligation ended because the time for her habeas and other legal remedies had ended is not to say that she wasn't engaged in lawyerly activity. And even if, as a lawyer, she went and held a press conference and a press release in which she puts very open and notoriously, it can't seem to me that that is anything comparable to, say, for example, Richard Reed, who lights a match in his shoe on an airplane to try and bring down an entire passenger ship with huge loss of life. That's a terrorist case. This was not a terrorist case.
That fundamentally misunderstands the way terrorist groups function. The way that they function is they're very reliant upon a higher authority that will declare whether they can be at war or whether they're not at war. Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman for Jamaat Islamiyah was that higher authority. He was someone who the terrorist group's members looked up to. If he said the ceasefire was on, they would go with the ceasefire. If he said the ceasefire was off and null and void, they would resume hostilities against the Egyptian government. So that very much underestimates and overlooks the way these groups actually function.
Andrew, although the regulations governing lawyer relationship with clients have changed, were in place to some extent before 9/11, post 9/11, there's really been a ratcheting up of restrictions as well as videotaping those conferences, profoundly changing the way lawyers relate to their clients. Well, that's one of the reasons, I think, that there has been so much concern in the criminal defense bar in general and perhaps the bar more broadly about the implications of those restrictions. Do they trouble you at all?
No, because again, it depends on whether somebody is pre-conviction or post-conviction, particularly as we're dealing with this instance. People need to understand, when the blind sheikh was on trial, when he was presumed innocent, he had some of the best legal assistance that a defendant could conceivably have. He didn't have one lawyer, just Lynne. He had three. They were able to present a very robust defense. They were able to meet with him quite freely even after his conviction when he was preparing his appeal.
He is no longer entitled to any legal representation after his conviction or even after his remedies have run their course.
Well,
while there are other options, either arranging with other governments to make arrangements with the United States or advocating for a client. That's why the government let him.
That's not legal work in my mind. We're talking about, you want to talk about the role of a traditional...
Why was she allowed, let me ask you this, because Marvin raised this point before, why was she allowed to visit him and why did she sign one of those forms that is essentially for lawyers?
Because we happen to live in a country where we continue to allow people to meet with their lawyers even after their convictions are final.
Purpose?
And in fact, they're able to, if there's a basis for it, challenge the conditions of confinement of the individual. Now, it happens that this particular individual is one of the best cared for defendants in the United States.
Andy, if she wasn't a lawyer engaged in lawyerly work, then the government had the absolute right under those rules and regulations to prevent her from seeing Sheikh Abdul Rahman. She could have done the same thing that you're advocating
Marvin,
now.
let me ask
it could have been challenged by the government. They didn't. They let her see her client.
Marvin,
so
let
she
me
must
ask
have
a
been doing
question which
lawyerly
addresses perhaps why this issue has been so widely followed among lawyers. Does it have implications for representation of accused or persons who are in a post-conviction status? I mean, that's obviously one of the issues on the table. Are there broader implications for this or not?
There are much broader implications. It's now pretty clear, with hindsight, that one of the central components of the Bush administration's war on terror was really the whole role lawyers played. The Bush administration was determined from the very start, 6 months after 9/11, that it was going to go after terrorists. And one of the component parts of that strategy was to make sure that if they had due process rights, they were going to really make it very, very difficult for lawyers to enforce those due process rights. And when you start to have situations where lawyers are being spied upon in their conversations with their clients through FISA warrants or otherwise, the implication for the defense bar as a whole is very clear. I'm not taking one of those cases. I can't worry about a statement that I may make out of context or in context in the course of advising the client that the government picks up on.
Let me go to David and then Andrew. David, you're a counterterrorism consultant, but also a lawyer by training.
Right.
Is it your view that there is a point, even while in post-conviction status, that you can extinguish a person's right to counsel or severely restrict it if the person has been convicted of a terrorist-related offense?
You may be able to severely restrict it. I think...
What about the fact, the key here, for example, which is the government can overhear and record anything that's said between lawyer and client? Well, is that troublesome to the lawyer part of your experience?
Yeah, I think that it is troublesome, but I think also in this case there's a balancing of interests. One of the things that you have experience with in the legal system is lawyers who have smuggled messages out of cells on behalf of terrorists. That happened in the Lynne Stewart case, for one. And also it's worth noting that all of the restrictions that Lynne Stewart harbored under were under the Clinton administration. None of them came up...
greatly enhanced, including the videotaping post 9/11.
They certainly were enhanced.
By the way, Clinton, because Clinton did it, probably only makes it bipartisan, not necessarily good.
Right. I'm not saying that makes it good or bad. I'm just saying that the issue of the Bush administration, because these days, like, Bush administration, obviously very unpopular, and I'm certainly not a fan either.
It's a fair argument, I was just asking.
Right, but part of it is that's kind of a trigger word, and it's important to note that these special administrative measures preceded the Bush administration entirely.
I just think Marvin's nightmare scenario is so divorced from reality as to be night from day. We actually, first of all, there's no record of lawyers being heavily prosecuted since 9/11. You have this particular case, and
wouldn't that justify something that Lynne Stewart says, which is she thought she'd be treated administratively for this, and that was her expectation? Wouldn't that affect discretion?
Actually, I think that's a factor to her detriment. I would say if she was figuring she was going to violate these, but it would only be handled administratively, I'd say that's a point against her, not for her. But my point is, not only has there not been a record of prosecuting lawyers, but if you take a look down at Guantanamo Bay, you have lawyers who are basically tripping over themselves to go down there and volunteer to represent...
But that's another show, and we'll bring you back for that.
Well, but what he said is that the lawyers don't want to take these cases.
Marvin,
lawyers can't wait
Let me
to
take you a place.
cases.
I know you don't want to go, but given your opposition to the prosecution, the sentence 28 months when the government's asking for 30 years, your reaction to that?
Well, a pretty stinging rebuke. You know, I can't go into the mind of Judge Kodal, but he's a federal district court judge presiding over one of the most high-profile cases in history. The government says, give this person 30 years. The judge does two things. One, he sentences her to 28 months, thereby, in his mind, fitting the punishment for the crime
Marvin,
convicted.
given the appeal, put on your crystal ball, you got to give me a one-word answer. Is the sentence going to change? Is she going to wind up with 28 months, or is the government going to prevail and get either heavier time or 30 years?
I think the conviction is going to be overturned, and we're going to start from scratch.
You're cheating, Marvin. But, Andrew, your view?
I think the sentence should be increased, but it won't be. The conviction will be upheld. And
how far would you increase it?
I think she's got to have 10 years at least for this offense.
And you predict that as well as think that's correct?
No, I think the court will uphold the sentence. The judges have great discretion under the...
David, what do you think?
I agree with Andy. I think the court will uphold the sentence. I think it should be higher. I think in particular the rationale given for making the sentence lower was outrageous, in that he could have given a downward departure because of her medical condition. Instead he talks about a lifetime of good work. But remember, she was a highly political attorney.
Would you push it as high as 20 or 30 years?
Probably not 20 or 30. I'd probably give her at least 5, probably around 10.
And your reaction if the court somehow wound up in the range of probation, what would you think the implications of that?
I would think it was outrageous. It's only by sheer dumb luck that nobody died as a result of what Lynne Stewart did. The fact that she did something that endangered many lives, but it just happened that nobody died, that really doesn't exculpate her at all. What she did is...
That's a crock. Anyway, we're going to stop that there. Yeah, so these two clowns, the two right-wingers here, Andrew McCarthy, the clearly more thoughtful of the two, they both say 10 years. And that's exactly what the judge did after it was remanded to him with stern language from the Second Department of the appellate system of the federal judiciary. And so she went in in November of 2009, and I was there, and we spoke with her. She held a press conference, and this is what she said on November 17th, shortly before she went in.
I think the timing is interesting. I'm not going to get into a big conspiracy theory, although someone said to me, why not? But to damage my credibility, I don't want to do that. And I do feel that I started out by having a press conference, not unlike this one, when I was first arrested. And I said then, and I repeat again, I believe I did everything I did as a lawyer should do in the best interest of their client. And I'm sorry that the circuit also agreed, and there was no differing opinion. I also am very sad that all of the brilliant constitutional issues raised pre-trial by my lawyers, raised at trial by my lawyers, and raised post-trial in the appeal have all been swept under the rug. The First Amendment, the question of attorney-client sanctity, that a lawyer talking to a client cannot be listened in on, all of these are now just grist for their mill. So we await their latest decision. We're not sure yet what our next move is, but one thing I can promise you, I will go on fighting.
Yeah! All right. Okay.
Yeah! This is a case that is bigger than just me personally. That it is. I am no criminal, and I will fight it on the grounds for all the lawyers, some of whom are here, and the Lawyers Guild, which has supported me from day one, which will speak after I finish. All of us know that when you become a criminal lawyer, you sign on to represent your client with zeal. And that's all I was doing. I was never doing anything else. So while it's disappointing, I'll quote what Adlai Stevens said when he lost the presidency. It hurts too much I'm too old to cry, but it hurts too much not to. So thank you very much, and I hope we'll be finding out whether or not I'm surrendering sooner or later, and we certainly will let everybody know.
So what message do you think this case sends to whoever is possibly going to be representing the police chick mom that is coming in?
Well, I think it sends the same message it sent from the very, very beginning, that if you're going to lawyer for these people, you better toe very close to the line that the government has set out. And it also says, and we're going to be watching you every inch of the way. We're going to listen to your attorneys with your conversations with your lawyer. We're going to watch every piece of paper you sign or use. I mean, it is... everybody is happy that it's in a trial mode, not in a military mode, but yet it's hardly in the trial mode that we have come to expect in a regular criminal trial in the federal courthouse or in the state courthouse.
How are you going to keep fighting this?
Well, that's to be decided. My lawyers will tell me what my options are there, but I certainly intend to remain a public figure as long as I can, and even if I'm behind bars, I hope I'll be like Eugene Debs and all the people who have been behind bars and fought their cases from that posture. There is a very large population out there that is very, very concerned. People have called me from all over the country, and we're going to keep them mobilized. We're going to keep this issue before them. It really, I think that the manner in which this opinion comes down, its immediacy, as opposed to saying you two can take a week or so to get yourself together, says something about what they think and what they want me to end up.
Are you going
as.
to the Supreme Court?
I'm not sure. We have to discuss that. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room, and I'm not sure that the Supreme Court is the friendliest of venues.
Do they have to stick to the 28 months?
No, now it's been remanded. That was what all the argument was about, was whether or not the judge had sentenced me properly. They did not hold that the sentence was illegal, but they did send it back for reconsideration, and they raised certain issues they thought he hadn't dealt with. But you know, when I read that, they made a great business of comparing my 28 months with Muhammad Yusri's 20 months. But you know, I've lived a lot longer than Muhammad Yusri, and I think that the judge's decision was really based on my lifetime of work. And you know, when he said at sentencing, it's something that still I tear up when I think of it, and I'm so grateful to him that he said, you know, she has not only been of great service to her clients, but also to her country. You know, that they're not considering that bigger picture when they say he should remand and consider whether or not there was perjury on the stand. There wasn't. We should remand and consider whether or not the thing that I did as a lawyer is more blameworthy. I'm sure he considered it. He is known for considering every single issue. So we hope that it will not be a change in the sentence. I'm sure the government is going to go right back to asking for the 30 years it wanted originally, but I'm hoping not.
Do you see any difference in the way the Holder Justice Department is handling the case as opposed to Gonzalez?
No. In a word, no. I fear that it's just an extension of what we saw under Bush, especially with this kind of case, this kind of issue before it. They are going to stay very close to what the Bush regime did. We see it also in cases that the Arar case of extraordinary rendition and other cases where they are not going to stray very far. They're not going to come out of any new understanding of the law as far as, quote, these cases are concerned.
Lynne, doesn't the judge have discretion, though? I mean, Judge Kodal has a great deal of discretion, and the court sort of seemed to indicate that in their opinion, so he could actually resentence you to the same amount of time.
Absolutely, and that is what we're hoping for. He is I think Judge Calabresi said this is a man who makes wise decisions, and we certainly agree with that, and he certainly considered it. And I think that we, of course, hope that he will stay in the same place and have confidence that it was the right decision then and it is the right decision now. Myself, I applauded him, although it was taken out of context, but he certainly had courage to give me the sentence in the first place, and I hope that courage will be replicated now that it's been sent back to him.
Can you remind us of the alleged underlying offense and the timeline? As I recall, it was something that happened during the Clinton administration. You were not prosecuted then. You were not prosecuted in the first year of the Bush administration. It was only after 9/11 that you became a dangerous criminal.
Well, you're exactly right. I had a visit with my client in 2000. A couple of months after that, I made a press release in his behalf. The press release was counter to the government's instructions to keep him incommunicado. which, well, we could write a book about our interpretation, their interpretation, whether that happened or not. But at any rate, the press release was made. We claimed on appeal that this was a First Amendment issue, that it was written. We're not talking about sending soldiers or guns or money. We're talking about a piece of paper, a press release, and whether it even fit under the law. But these are all issues that we raised on appeal, which were not decided in our favor, obviously. And the fact of the matter is that to me, the loss of those major constitutional questions is the real loss here. What happens to me is not happy, and I can feel bad about that. But the real loss to all of us is that these constitutional issues were not dealt with, were not upheld. It's only going to make it that much harder for lawyers representing criminal defendants.
And of course, in these 7 years, you've remained active in your social justice work. Do you think that had an influence on the appeals decision?
I have no way of knowing. I do know that we do seem to annoy the people in power. We would like to do a lot more than annoy them. But for right now, we know that being a gadfly may be enough. I don't know. But as I said, my future plans maybe go to the Supreme Court, but certainly continue the agitation. Agitate, agitate, agitate.
So you're saying nothing changed with Obama as president?
I don't think so. Not as far as Justice Department is concerned. He is a continuation, and I think he basically follows orders the same way Bush did. Maybe a little more gracefully.
Harvard
a little
Law
better
School.
English.
Harvard Law School.
Harvard Law School, maybe. But Bush was Yale, of course. So.
Would your attorneys like to make any statement?
My attorneys, I'm here against the advice of counsel, I want to as usual. What kind of a lawyer is that? I would like Danny Myers to come up and say a few words on behalf of the National Lawyers Guild, though. So can we get Danny up here to let him... I know, but he's got to get back.
Firstly, my name is Daniel Myers. I'm the past president of the New York City chapter of the National Lawyers Guild. We have always stood solidly behind Lynne Stewart. Lynne has been a friend of mine and a friend of the Guild for 40 years now. The situation here is kind of anomalous because on the one hand, the circuit with regard to Lynne's sentence has agreed with Judge Kodal's analysis of the person Lynne Stewart. In fact, it's really interesting because, let me read from the circuit's decision. This is the Second Circuit that affirmed Lynne's conviction. Like the district court, we are impressed by the factors that figured in Stewart's modest sentence, particularly her admirable history of providing, at no little personal cost to herself, proficient legal services in difficult cases to those who could not otherwise afford them.
There you go.
So we're talking about an extraordinary person, so extraordinary that the district court sentenced Lynne Stewart to time, but with regard to the time that had been requested and demanded by the U.S. government, it was slight or modest in terms of the district court. We felt that Lynne Stewart should not have had any time.
Right.
I mean, she was, for the same reason that she received, quote unquote, a modest sentence, she certainly would have been an apt candidate to wage her legal struggle while on probation. So that there is no need for Lynne Stewart to be remanded, to have her bail revoked, pending further appeals, which she, I am sure, is going to take. I cannot speak for her or for her lawyers, but I would dare say that she will at least try to have a review by the full panel here in the Second Circuit, and I would think also the Supreme Court of the United States, because what she has said fundamentally is that how can you materially aid anyone by speaking? What is the concept of material aid? What does material mean? It has a tangible notion, and the whole furor around Lynne Stewart has been about her speaking. And whether the government thinks her speech was temperate or intemperate doesn't make it criminal, and I think that's exactly what her position has been. So that the New York City chapter of the National Lawyers Guild cannot see any reason that Lynne Stewart should be remanded and have her bail revoked while she continues to seek redress and justice in the courts.
Thank you, Danny. So, questions? Any more questions?
Can you make an application to the trial court for bail again?
Well, the Second Circuit is their boss, and they said bail's revoked, so I don't think we can.
They can't grant it again.
They can't. He can't undermine what they have said. Whether or not they can do it, they can give me some more time and not make such an immediacy out of it. That we will see, I imagine, fairly shortly.
Lynn, what's your surgery for?
Old lady problems, ex-baby problems, plumbing problems. That's enough. I've been told by my lawyers that's enough.
Have your lawyers going back to the Second Circuit and ask for a full court review again?
No, not yet. They are basically today dealing with Judge Kodal and trying to understand whether or not what I should do next. Should I be walking over to the Marshal Service right now, or are we going to be able to wait at least to see whether or not they will be able to go to the circuit or take some other action?
And the latest you've heard is that you are still waiting to hear?
I'm still waiting. Yes, still waiting.
So where are you going from here?
Where am I going from here? Well, either to the Marshal's office, or I'm going to go get something to eat, or I'm going to go home, or the usual things that I've been doing for the last 7.5 years. But it's wonderful to see the people arrayed here. I can't tell you, every one of them has had a real role to play in this case, and has been to court or has given me, how are you going? Have you got a decision yet? Good luck. I can't tell you, it's uplifting to just look around and see the faces here. Co-counsel for many cases, and just folks that have been with me from the very beginning. And I know over this country there are hundreds, if not thousands, of others who would be here today if they could be. So that's really quite wonderful. And I certainly feel that the sentence that Judge Kodal was influenced by the thousands of letters that people wrote to him telling about their interaction with me or telling him about who I was within their community. So there were thousands, and he did read them. So happy to see everybody out here today.
Do you see yourself working on the defense of the terrorists being brought from Guantanamo Bay?
Since I've been disbarred, I would find that an amazing...
No, I don't mean representing them in court, but being with your great experience.
The terms of the disbarment are you can't work on anything. And my inclination probably would be to work on some of the political prisoners held in this country, like Matul Shakur, like Sundiata Kohli, and like, help me, Seiko Odinga, Mumia. Why is it, if I say Matulu, I never can remember Mumia. If I say Mumia, all of these men are Americans. They've been in jail for tens and 20s of years. Leonard Pelletier, all of these people. That would be, if I were able to work, this is where I would put my expertise and love and whatever.
Right on.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you, Lynne Stewart. Thank you. Thank you for all you do.
That was Lynne Stewart on the 17th.
Everybody to the commissary.
We will.
On the 17th
We don't know
of November in 2009. That was when the decision came down from the Second Department denying her appeal and revoking her bail. She was told that she better get ready to go to jail without much more information than that, as you heard. And so she, 2 days later, was told to report, or she was told to report 2 days later, and this is what she had to say then on the 19th. This is again outside Foley Square.
More than 100 people showed up on a short notice to stand up for Lynne Stewart today, who surrendered herself to federal authorities after a federal appeals court on Monday revoked her bail and ordered her to prison. Stewart addressed the crowd before she was taken away by federal authorities.
I want to remind you all that today was the day that Joe Hill was executed. And you know what he said at the time of his execution? Don't mourn me, organize! 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 Free Lynne Stewart! Free Lynne Stewart! Front and foremost today, I feel like I can get in there and I am going to stand up and please, I am going to do what we did in the 60s. That's right.
And remember, you can jail Lynne Stewart, but you can't jail her ideas.
That's right. Yeah. You can put me in jail, but I still, my love, my ideas, my forcefulness, I hope will remain with all of you, and I will return.
And that was on the day that she surrendered to federal authorities, November 19th, 2009. I want to see what this is here. Give me 1 second to check what this is. This is a couple of days later outside the courthouse. I interviewed some people. This is on December 2nd.
Patrick Moynihan Federal Courthouse in Lower Manhattan, while attorney Lynne Stewart is inside at a hearing. Her case was sent back by the Federal Appeals Court to the District Court for a review of her sentence. She was convicted of passing information from her client in the form of a press release, which the federal government said could have been used by terrorists. The district court was asked by the appellate court to review her sentence. The three judges each claimed that the sentence was too lenient. She faces a possible 30 years in prison. We spoke with some of the people that attended the hearing today outside the courthouse.
Well, first I was in the overflow room.
This is Joe
There
Friendly.
was a huge turnout, and the courtroom itself, which was huge, got filled up, and the judge was, I thought, very open and straightforward. Basically, he said that looking at the law, what he's supposed to do is get a sense of the spirit of the mandate.
That's from the federal appellate court.
Right. The old Second Circuit.
Right.
And he welcomed the lawyers' opinions. You know, do you want to write something up? Do you want to brief this? Do you want to brief that? What they were hassling about was whether it should be de novo or whether he has to revisit the old stuff. And he said, well, inasmuch as I do have to consider what happened since the sentencing, which is mainly the change in her medical condition, that therefore he really theoretically has to look at everything.
And then they set a calendar for the next hearing or any of that?
Well, they said that they wanted the probation report, I think, February 5th. And the attorneys to respond to that by March 12th, and the sentencing itself would occur April 22nd.
Best as I understand it, they set a scheduling
This is Joel Kupferberg from
schedule
the National Lawyers Guild.
people from the federal government and for Lynne's defense people to exchange papers and basically saying what they should look at in terms of the resentencing or not the resentencing. And the judge basically wants to handle it as a de novo, meaning that he's willing to look at everything from the beginning and post the original sentencing. So there's more of a procedural question, and they also brought up the fact that Lynne needs medical help, that they should take that into consideration.
What was really important, I thought, today was the courtroom was packed, an overflow courtroom was packed. There were lines of people who came early, and when Lynne came into the courtroom, everyone stood and applauded, and it went for, I don't know, well over a minute until we had to stop. People then sat down. And also, as soon as the judge left, again, everyone stood and applauded Lynne and called out to her. And I think that's a kind of courtroom support that's extremely important, that we keep that pressure on, because that's what needs to be shown.
We heard that they laid out a preliminary schedule of briefings and then ultimately sentencing in April.
Right.
What does that mean in terms of a timeline for organizing?
Well, I think there's time that we have to really keep the pressure on and keep this at the forefront of every agenda. And that's what it took to fill the courtroom today. People were sending out notices from every different group and committee, including it with their other activities of what was happening and putting that right at the top. So doing that, combining it, and showing that Lynne is very much part of a living struggle out here right now is important. Also, I think during this time, it's very important for people to send those letters and sign the online petitions and send books and do what is important with every political prisoner. Lynne Stewart, but all the hundreds and thousands of prisoners.
So you started with 2 courtrooms full of people, and each one of those acts as an organizer between now and April. What do you think we'll have outside the courtroom?
Well, I think we have to plan to swell the streets around here. That's important. Because really, this decision by the appellate court is meant to send a message. And if we take ourselves seriously, we have to send a people's message.
What I saw happen today is what always happens. I think now more than ever in this digital age, in this time of so-called progress, I think we're starting to recognize the value of dissent, and we're starting to recognize the value of a movement if it is powerful and if it is committed. I think we had a great showing here today for Lynne, but I think we can do better. I think that Lynne's situation, just like Mumia's situation, just like all the political prisoner situations in this country, is really a reflection of what we're doing as a movement. Now, certainly, when we do interviews like this, there's a time to galvanize folks and to inspire them. But I think there's also a time for the truth. And looking at the warrior that Lynne is, that her husband, Ralph, is, and I've worked with them on several issues over the years, and they've had the same tenacity, whether it was talking about the Board of Education, whether it was talking about corruption in our schools in terms of the city stealing contracts, and any of those issues. They attacked with the same ferocity that they are exhibiting to defend themselves. So I think we could take a lesson from that. Lynne is 70 years old. Ralph is in his 70s. And there are a lot of young people who should have been out here today. They should have needed 5 overflow rooms. So I would extend this as a message. More importantly than whatever the particulars are of the case, when the next court date is, we have to do better as a movement. Because if we can't save Lynne, if we can't save Mumia, it's a commentary on us and our effectiveness at what it is that we say we are committed to and what it is that we say that we want to do. And of course, this is obviously not directed to those diehards who are here all the time, and we all see each other. But when we talk about the effort of outreach and when we talk about the effort of trying to build the movement, it cannot be an exercise in simply gathering with each other each time. I think if everybody committed to bring one new person, like I did today, somebody who may or may not be political, we've got to attack these things with the same ferocity that our enemies are attacking them with. They've got flashy editing, and they've got multiple news outlets, and they've got the upper hand in terms of the reach and the scope, and we have to match that with the commitment and the desire for freedom. We have to do better. It's often not convenient. So I would just send that message. I would say if we really love Lynne and Ralph and we really want to support them, it should be fire in the streets.
So this was my opportunity to talk to her, and I enjoyed it. And
It was nice to see her.
It was great to see her.
How much time did you get?
What is it? 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Since they took her a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
No, he hasn't been in to visit?
At all, right?
Just a few minutes ago. And what they say, I says, I didn't want to embarrass anyone, but they says, like no contact. What were we going to do up there?
Yeah, hello, right? Yeah.
Well, you guys were only in your 70s, so they got to watch out.
Yeah, like I said, in the 70s, but you never know.
With Viagra and all that. The zippers.
Yeah.
What happened in there today?
Well, there's going to be a resentencing. There's going to be a new probation report. There's going to be a lot of legal back and forth. I think Josh Dratel will be looking for a lesser sentence. The government will be looking for a longer sentence. And we shall see.
Did you get a sense from the judge of how he's looking
never. I tried to read the judge during all of the trial.
Poker face.
We do what we do, they do what they do.
The judge said letters from the public is not even considered.
Oh, no, the letters have to go, same as the last time. Now, I will say that a letter went out from a filmmaker, and she has received 800 hits in 4 days, and we're hoping to double those numbers by sending out the letter that she wrote, and then people respond. We have responses from Cynthia McKinney, Cindy Sheehan, the Haitian union movements, Norway, South Korea. The world is looking at this and speaking on it. So she'd asked me yesterday whether I wanted her to print out the responses. So I says no. Now I see we have time, and I think by the time, maybe in a week, we're going to have 2,000 responses from around the world, which we will print out, run through the attorneys, and have Judge Kohler read them.
They're going to be looking at some of the original submissions de novo?
Yes.
What do you think that means in terms of implications?
Not the foggiest notion. They're going to go over, what did they say, her probation. Probation? Are you kidding? She never broke any rules. But you see, I think the biggest issue here is the thing that frightens me is speech. She went in there on a speech crime. She was told by her attorneys not to speak. And as you heard before she went, she was standing there and she says, if I'm not about speech, I'm about nothing, and my speech must continue. And so when they say new events, well, she's sick, and she has spoken an awful lot since. Since then. And she speaks unkindly about the government, and the government deserves to be spoken unkindly. So here we are. And I'm just so proud of her when I said, there are those out here who feel that finally that you're inside, you should stop talking. And her answer was, well, those people are conservative. So she's in her element. She's going to continue. And I'm so happy about that.
What do you think people can do right now to help?
Same as before. Write letters, let people know what's happening. Momia sent a form out, that people can sign on to. People all around the country. I've heard from people in San Francisco, people from Toronto, said they're going to send letters and do attachments. This new computer stuff where you can do things. So I said, yeah, do it. Say how you feel. And when people ask me if I've written a letter, the answer is no. Because the letter that I would write, I know would not help Lynne. So I say the people that they should write their letters the way they feel and see, and have others sign it. So I'm encouraging that.
From the Daniel Patrick Moynihan Federal Courthouse in Lower Manhattan, I'm Don DeBar for WBAIX.org.
And that was on the second day of December, the first hearing in the resentencing of Lynne Stewart on the order of the Second Department. It was sent back to Judge Kodal. And the schedule that they referenced there ended up being extended until July. July 15th was the date the resentencing was announced. In the intervening period when that had been scheduled, Glenn Ford spoke about Lynne's case.
To introduce Glenn Ford of the Black Agenda Report.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the general political situation because it is in the struggle against the powers that be that we suffer our political fatalities and political casualties and political prisoners. I think it needs to be said again that the Black is Back Coalition was the first coalition of African American organizations to march in direct opposition to President Obama's continuation and his stepping up of George Bush's imperial offensive, that offensive both at home and abroad. And it needs to be said again that it was the Uhuru movement that first directly confronted Barack Obama in the flesh in St. Petersburg, Florida, before he was nominated, with that placard that said, "What about the black community, Mr. Obama?" It didn't seem like a very brave thing to do. It should be de rigueur, SOP. Thousands of us should have been doing it, but it fell to the Uhuru movement in St. Petersburg, Florida, to do that. And it also fell to the Uhuru movement to propose in a Washington, D.C. apartment, a small apartment, that the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations be created. That was also their contribution, we think, to history, and they should get all the props that they deserve for that. That Nellie Bailey, the great organizer, thinker, and maker of things that happen in Harlem, was calling out Barack Obama before it was even clear that he had a chance at getting the Democratic nomination. And she wasn't just calling him out, she was holding meetings and staging debates, and that's how I came what does this really mean to us politically and economically, not just egotistically. So she was in the vanguard right here in Harlem in raising those questions. And I've got to say that Black Agenda Report, the Black Agenda Report team, of which Nellie Bailey is an integral part, has been studying Barack Obama since the summer of 2003, since his name first showed up on the list of the Democratic Leadership Council, which is the bag man for corporations, the bag man that distributes the corporate money to the Democratic Party. And also, in that same summer, he took off from his senatorial campaign website his now much vaunted 2002 anti-war speech. He took it down because it appeared that the war was won. And he had no opposition to that. And there's nothing that Americans like better than a war that they think they won. So he dropped that speech, and we pointed that out. And that was how our involvement, that's how we somehow earned the reputation as being Obama haters. So there's a lot of seniority up here in terms of those who first pointed out what was so wrong about Barack Obama for black people and for the world. The pace of events since that election in November has been really just dizzying. It boggles the mind. I don't think I'm getting old and things are moving too fast for me, because I see that they seem to be moving too fast for everybody. Really? The quickening pace of the deterioration of imperialism is just stunning. Yes. It is difficult to keep up with its falling downness. But that is our job. It has actually turned out to be worse more quickly than we thought. Obama has accomplished a great deal. I didn't think he could do it, but he's accomplished a great deal in expanding and stepping up the pace of George Bush's aggressions. He expanded George Bush's theaters of war, and not just in Pakistan and Afghanistan and now in Yemen. But recently, the United States held joint exercises with 30 African nations. And those joint exercises all revolved around the use of American command and control procedures and American command and control equipment by these 30 African armies. Now, what does that mean? Every time these African armies are put in the field, they are using U.S. equipment to command and control their troops, U.S. procedures devised by the Americans, taught to them directly by the Americans to control their troops, and they have direct general to general and major to major and captain to captain relationships between all of these African military officers and American military officers. Now, does it really matter whether AFRICOM has a headquarters in a host country on the continent of Africa? And they do, by the way, have a headquarters. It's in Djibouti, which borders on Somalia and Eritrea. But does it really matter if they have a headquarters on the soil of Africa in a formal sense when they are really embedded in the armies of at least 30 African nations? This penetration, military penetration of Africa, has increased in pace exponentially under Barack Obama, the half African man. Under Obama, and almost entirely under his watch, the American state has been swallowed whole by Wall Street. Now, any economist who is not a direct servant of either Wall Street or the administration, and they really are one and the same, but any of those economists would agree, there is a consensus, that about $14 trillion actually physically went to Wall Street in the first year of the Obama administration. Not only that, they essentially, through the Federal Reserve, have an ATM to the rest of the U.S. Treasury, so they can draw down anytime they want. And this is why they're talking now about fiscal austerity for the public sector, because they are going to draw down. And it won't be just direct transfers from the Treasury and through rookie-dookie by the Federal Reserve. They aim to privatize and squeeze out every dollar of the public sector that they can. And Barack Obama has given them the green light to do that. We see the privatization of education proceeding at a furious pace through the transition to charter schools. And Obama is on point with that. Even the hedge funds are now heavily investing in charter schools, and that is something new. That is under Obama, who has been far more aggressive and certainly far more effective in his privatization of education policies than George Bush ever was. Charter schools and other forms of educational privatization are also an integral part of the drive for gentrification, which quickens its pace every day. We've seen, under Obama, a relentless expansion of the national security state, with Obama keeping almost all of George Bush's powers and adding some new ones of his own, including the right to assassinate American citizens. And of course, as has already been alluded to, on the streets of America, we see unoffensive of harassment and control and humiliation of our people. 600,000 almost in New York City last year. We are just now told 300,000 in Philadelphia. This is being replicated everywhere. Yes, Arizona's new anti-immigrant laws are bad. But what's been going on in New York City every day is actually worse, much more lawless. And we don't have national demonstrations against it, and we hardly have local demonstrations against it. Finally, Obama is clearly as much a servant of big oil as George Bush ever was. And the Gulf of Mexico screams out in pain to tell us that. So much has happened in just a little bit of time. But the real fact is that we have been building to this catastrophe for a very long time. And the catastrophe that I'm talking about is the collapse of black politics, the collapse that necessitated the creation of the Black is Back coalition. We know definitively that black politics has collapsed when the vast bulk of black people and black organizations and black institutions wind up on the same side as Goldman Sachs and Wall Street in 2008. That is definitive proof that something has gone very, very wrong with our politics. But we've been on that road for about 150 years, at least according to the theory I'm about to elaborate to you. I assume that many of you are familiar with Michelle Alexander and her book. It's a great book. It's called Mass Incarceration, The New Jim Crow. Michelle Alexander has a sister named Leslie, and she's a professor as well. She's a professor of history. And she co-edited a book called African or American. Both of those sisters appeared on Dr. Jared Ball's Pacifica show in Washington, D.C. Dr. Jared Ball is a member of the Black is Back Coalition and of the Black Agenda Report team. And so Michelle Alexander and Leslie Alexander were both on that show. And Michelle Alexander explained how mass black incarceration is a means of reconstituting the old racial order. And then her sister Leslie comes on, and she explains why most of so-called black leadership is so reluctant to deal with, to get anywhere next to, close to, the issue of black mass incarceration. And she points out that in the 1830s and the 1840s, a nascent black leadership came to a consensus on a strategy that she calls moral uplift. And essentially, to paraphrase her, moral uplift says that if black people were able to convince white people that black folks were as moral and as God-fearing and as patriotic as anybody else, and maybe even more so, then sometime in the future, white people would allow black people to have some more upward mobility. That moral uplift strategy has been a constant river of political thought among our people ever since. It brought us Booker T. Washington, with some help from the robber barons of his day. And it has brought us Barack Obama, with a lot of help from the robber barons of today. But there's always been another river of black political thought and black political action. And that one calls for agitation, agitation, agitation. And that river of black political thought and action knows that power concedes nothing without a demand. That's what the Black is Back coalition is all about, that we can coalesce around that distinct long-time river of black thought. The moral uplift strategy and all of its progeny is bankrupt. We understand, we can see that it's bankrupt. They've already had their president, and he is a catastrophe. That tendency, that long-time river of black thought has nowhere else to go except absolute capitulation to power. That tendency not only abandons our political prisoners, but it abandons our 1 million or so rank and file prisoners, the prisoners of America's gulag. We in the Black is Back coalition dare to struggle, and we know that ultimately we will win, because our river of thought and action goes forward. Free all political prisoners, power to the people.
That was Glenn Ford speaking at a rally for Lynne Stewart about a month before the resentencing was announced on the 15th. And when that happened, we were at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan, and we spoke with some of the people who came out when Lynne learned that she had been sentenced to 10 years. 10 years. And we're going to try to find some of this now. Here we go. Let's go past that. Here we go.
Tell me what you thought.
Tell me what you thought?
Well, we're all having a rough time.
What do I think? I mean, it's very hard to listen to the judge sentence a 70-year-old woman who I feel is innocent to be in prison for 8 more years. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand as an American how we can treat people that way. I'm so sorry my cell phone's ringing. I don't see what the point is. It seems to me that there are a lot of more serious criminals out there in the world, like the head of BP, John Yoo, who authorized the torture, and to sentence someone as kind and generous as Lynne Stewart for a crime that I don't believe that she committed. I believe that she is innocent. What was very disturbing to me is that the judge quoted a lot the case of Abu Ali, and he was a young man who was tortured in Saudi Arabia for a year and brought back to this country, and he was convicted of terrorism, conspiracy to kill George Bush, and a crime of which I think he was quite innocent. And he was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and but when the government appealed, and he was given life in prison. And I don't understand how in this country the government can appeal a sentence they don't like and make it longer. And I think it's an outrage. It's an extremely difficult situation. I don't know what we do. I feel that these cases, all these cases that we look at, is like a loss of our government. So I hope that helps.
I'm sorry to get you right on the way out. But
it's okay. I've been here too many times.
Do you know where Don is with my equipment?
He's over on the end. He's at the end.
It's Ramsey Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you. Attorney General Ramsey Clark.
Let's see if we can get past some of this. Here we go. Ramsey Clark.
What's your reaction?
Jail the judge! Jail the judge!
It's not audible, unfortunately.
Underlying it all is fear of terrorism, which was Janice Smith part. We don't have the guts to stand up. We've grown people in the face of reality. But behind it all is both fear of terrorism and the exploitation of terrorism. It justifies a military budget. Murders occur all over the world. We spend more on arms than we do anything else. We spend more on arms than the rest of the world combined. So we stop that, our country would be a menace to peace on earth and perhaps to life on earth. So because of that, we have to do things like this to good women like Lynne Stewart, who's gave all their courage.
Talk about the chilling effect this has on other lawyers.
Well, we'll see whether they chill. Some will, some won't.
Thank you.
Free Lynne! Jail the judge! Free Lynne!
Let's see if we can find those Ward Churchill.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Walter?
Just spin you around.
Ray, just look at me. Can you just tell me what your name is and your relationship again?
My name is Ward Churchill. Lynne Stewart is my sister. In a figurative sense, we stand in solidarity. All I have to say about this travesty that occurred today is that John Yoo is a full professor at University of California at Berkeley. He, as a matter of record, is not contested, violated the Nuremberg standards for application of his legal skills, so-called, to provide the rationalization that led to the implementation of a program of systematic torture. He is a free man. In his case, we need to look forward. In Lynne Stewart's case, carrying a message is 10 years. This judge absolutely prostituted whatever integrity he may have had at the instruction of higher authorities. There was no justice in this court today. There is no justice in this system so long as international criminals are empowered to walk free and are rewarded by the society, and those who try to defend human rights are prosecuted. That's a violation of the recent resolution by the United Nations General Assembly, as I understand it, to defend human rights protectors. That's been invoked in other contexts. It needs to be invoked first and foremost by those in this country who purport to defend human rights.
Now, are you biologically related to Mrs. Ramsey, or you said sister, brother, and...
I'm related to you.
Thank you.
I'm related to everyone here.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Sorry, that needed to be clarified.
Thank you. Do you know what her last name is? Churchill. That's Ward Churchill. Ward Churchill.
Let's see what else we got here. We have any? Okay, there's some random stuff. I'm going to go to this group of interviews now and see what we got. We have a bunch of them, so let's see what we can dig up here. Here we go.
Basically, this
Here we go.
face of Obama himself. This was a career move on the part of the judge to be remanded by a higher court to go in and resentence, and it was in order. And I thought that the judge was extremely nervous. At the end of it, he could hardly defend his decision, and this flies in the face of the #1 terrorist in the U.S., Luis Posada Carriles, who bombed a Cubano airline, killing all aboard the entire fencing team of Cuba. He fired a mortar into the city of Miami. He has been described by the FBI as the #1 terrorist in the world. Yet he is free in the city of Miami, and there is no attempt on the part of the Obama administration to arrest him and hold him accountable. And if they can't do it, then extradite him to Venezuela.
Esperanza Martel, again, someone who struggled long and hard, certainly who knows of the work of Lynne Stewart. What do you think this is about today? What does it mean for people in struggle?
Basically, there's no justice in America. There's nothing new or novel. We know this. And she was basically, this was a decision that was made
before. They shouldn't have wasted people's time for 2.5 hours and then said that she was giving her 10 years. When he could have said that at the beginning. He could have said that in the beginning because it was decided. And what it means for us is we have to up the struggle. You know, we have to take the struggle on actively. And the people keep political prisoners alive. And it's up to us and to write to her to make sure that her defense committee has the money it needs to continue to do the political work. And there will be another appeal. So, and we have to take in consideration her medical condition. And we need doctors and who will challenge the state so that what the most that they could do at this point is, given time served, given the 2-year parole, is that she'll be in prison between 6 and 7 years. We have to reduce that, and we need to free Lynne Stewart now.
Legally, what do you think? What does this do to the legal system? What does this do to any concept of democracy in this country?
Well, as you know, this is a very disappointing day. I don't suffer any delusions about the system the criminal system that's in operation here. I apologize for being a little upset. I have been crying actually in court the entire time. Lynne Stewart is a political prisoner, and when the Court of Appeals sent a directive, if it can be called a directive to Judge Codal, I thought perhaps he would see it as telling them that he sat through the trial and he presided over this case and he saw everything that happened for the 9 months. I actually sat through much of that trial, and that he would have held his ground, and that, as I said in my letter to Judge Codal, that his only allegiance would have been to justice for Lynne Stewart. That his allegiance would not have been to perhaps being appointed to the Court of Appeals. And I'm not suggesting that Judge Codal has that allegiance, but I cannot fathom in my mind why he sentenced this 70-year-old woman who has worked for the community, who has done all that we are commanded to do as lawyers, to 10 years in prison. And I'm particularly upset about the fact the issue of political prison, as my comrade Esperanza has indicated, because last night as I lie in bed and thought about coming here today, I get a message from Suryat Al-Kholi, another political prisoner, that he has been given a 10-year hit at the age of 73, that he will not see the parole board until then too. So it's a lot for us to do, and we have to step it up. I don't know what the time period will be when Lynne is released, but we have to do all that we can to see that this does not happen. It is definitely a very chilling day for me. It's just a very, very upsetting moment, and I'm glad that I came. I'm glad I saw Lynne and I waved to her, and I'm glad that we're here, and we just have to continue to make freedom a reality and not just some illusions in this country.
What do you think this means? This was a Democratic administration. This was not the Ashcroft administration while they brought the initial charges. This was a Democratic administration that was asking for an enhanced sentencing. So what does this say to you about the political time that we're in and how we have to analyze it and proceed from here? I know it's an awful, big, difficult question to ask.
Not really.
But
it comes, once again, it depends on people's alliances, or whether it's Democratic or Republican. It is an alliance. It really is, and I don't want to sound flip, but it's something within your soul and within your conscience to tell you to do the right thing, and that your allegiance should only be to justice at all times. That should be the only allegiance, whatever the administration is. And apparently that does not happen. It is superseded by something more important for people.
It's superseded by the body politics, and in this case of the Obama administration. And what we are seeing is a continuation of the Bush doctrine as it relates to the criminal justice system, as it relates to the treatment of political prisoners. The Justice Department under Eric Holder had every opportunity to side with justice over that of politics. This was intended, in my opinion, and I concur with my colleague, to send a chilling message not only to the legal community, but also to the judicial branch, that you have to abide by the political program, the body politics, which is why this resentencing was imposed by a higher court. And we see it all the time. There is no separation between the judicial branch and the executive branch and the legislative branch. It has all melded into one for the body politics of protecting this U.S. oligarchy who is coming down on the people here with political repression that we cannot begin to fathom, and it is only going to get worse. Our struggle has to continue with Lynne and beyond Lynne.
And what can we understand about what happened here legally today, and what are some of the actual steps that Sister Lynne Stewart can take to ultimately be released from this tentacled octopus of right repression that was experienced here today? I'm asking you all the difficult questions, but I do that because I know you're up to answering them, Sister.
You want me to start? I'm sorry, let her start and then I'll...
Well, we go back to Esperanza Martel, and then we will...
First of all, I think that to think that there's a difference between the Republicans and the Democrats under capitalism is an illusion. This country is run by the bankers in Wall Street, and that is why Lynne is in prison and why we have so many political prisoners in jail, people who are innocent who didn't do anything. And that's why at this time, the situation in Puerto Rico, where the police are beating students for asking for a reduction in tuition and putting people in jail and tear gassing people. This is part of capitalism and colonialism and imperialism worldwide. The next steps are the same steps that we have taken with every political prisoner. One is, of course, an appeal. There has to be another appeal, and that will take time. Again, what I said before about the medical, making sure that her health is being taken care of, right? And then there's also the support for the family and the support of the Defense Committee economically. You want to ask that?
Actually, I do like the support of the Defense Committee economically, because that's what's needed. We have to really step it up. And I understand that there should be an appeal, and I'm wondering an appeal to what body at this point? I suppose it's the U.S. Supreme Court that the next appeal would be to. I'm worried. I suppose if you appeal back to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, that is the very court that directed and bullied, really, Judge Codal into making a decision of this nature.
Somebody tell me I'm wrong.
The people are the ones that are the propellers of justice, and I firmly believe that. It is the people that have to keep going forward and moving forward and not stopping until not only Lynne Stewart but all of the political prisoners issue that this country lies about. This country lies that it does not have political prisoners. We know that Lynne Stewart is a political prisoner. We know that. She was initially given 28 months because the judge saw that something he had to give her. Now he gives her 10 years because of a political decision, as my colleague Nellie Bailey has indicated. That is a political prisoner.
And we are speaking with?
We're speaking with Florence Morgan, who worked as an attorney and also who is very passionate about political prisoners issue and is very much involved in the cases of Sundiata Acoli, particularly Sundiata Acoli, and working very hard with his case.
Thank you. Let me also, I'm coming back in a second. Let me also...
And that was a number of interviews Mimi Rosenberg and Charlene Deck brought to us. All of that culminated in this yesterday. Thank you to Sally O'Brien, who sent us this sound. She was there. There was an awful lot of organizing in between, and a lot of work, and a Herculean effort by Ralph Pennington
Very tired.
Were you
and others.
surprised by the decision for compassionate release on New Year's Eve?
Yes. The word I was, Ralph never gave up hope. Ralph was fighting down to the final moments. For me, I was very discouraged. And I figured the strategy was to just keep me in there until I was closer and closer and closer, and then let me come home. And when that didn't happen, now I'm home. I'm still pretty much with it, I hope. And here I am with these wonderful children and grandchildren, and I look forward to beating the odds now. I look forward.
Well, you've done it so far.
We're trying, yes.
Can you tell us the moment that they told you? Can you share that with us?
Well, I was called down for a phone call with my lawyers, and my Jill Scheller was calling me from France, and she had talked to the U.S. attorney, who said, well, the papers are on their way to the judge right now. And so then I had a moment, and I said, well, the judge sometimes, the judge did what he said he'd do. He said that he would take the papers and he would look upon them favorably, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon he had signed off on time served.
And who told you?
Who told me? Varieties of prison officials who kept kind of dragging. But the funny part was, they literally threw me out of the prison. By the time we got all the words, they said, I said, maybe I ought to stay another day, because I said, there's so much mixed up here, and I have to get all those papers. And the warden looks at me and says, no, you're going today. We're going today.
And what did it feel like to leave the actual prison and the military base?
And without shackles, and without a belly chain, and without cuffs on, felt pretty good. And it was like,
then you knew it was real.
It was real.
And what did your sisters, who you've been there with and suffered through and helped, what did they all think, and what did they say? What about that experience?
They say, we know you won't forget us, and I don't forget them. That's the hardest part, to leave them behind in that parallel universe, and know that they're doing these very, very 20, 30-year sentences. It's just heartrending, but I won't forget them, and that's where I'm headed. I'm going to work for women's prisoners and for political prisoners. That's what I'm going to do.
Lynne, I can't help but say, I know that you were actually asked to write a letter of contrition, which I think you actually sat down and tried to pen, but weren't able to. Tell us why not. What stopped you from doing that, even if it meant getting out sooner?
I guess I'm my strange, stubborn self, and that's the only reason I didn't and I couldn't. And I'm here today as the I hope as the stand-up I've always been.
And seeing Ralph at the prison gate, what did that?
He wasn't at the prison gate.
Ralph, you missed the date.
He was getting off a plane, and they couldn't reach him, and they couldn't reach him, and they couldn't reach him. So finally, this other prisoner and I waited in a parking lot for him to show up. And if you know Ralph, you know he's not always on time.
How does it feel to be free?
That sounds like a song, Roman. How does it feel to be free? Ain't nothing like it. Nothing like it.
Any words that you'd like to give to the WBAI audience and the Democracy Now! Audience and Building Bridges audience?
Fight on. Don't ever give in. Resist, resist, resist. It's the only thing that makes life worth living. It really is.
And you made our lives worth living, and that of all political prisoners.
Well, this is a victory our movement needed. We needed this victory. It's a people's victory. People, you know, of course, in a prison, people keep saying, you know, it's all due to the Creator. It's all. I said, I'm from another school. I said, power from the people. All right. Whatever way you want to see it.
Hey, Lynn, this is Noelle. Thank you for coming home.
Noelle, how are you? I'm glad I'm here.
Oh, this is for Sister Lynn. This is
I can put that in the bag here.
Thank you, dear.
That's
So,
great.
you know, you can call upon us for any help that you need.
Thank you so much.
actually she's going to have a hard time keeping us away.
We're gonna have some parties, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I didn't come out of prison to.
Home Lynn party.
Yes. That's where I started, Nellie. That's where I started.
Hey, we need a party. The hell with the Democrats and Republicans. This is going to be the Lynne Stewart party.
They said
that
Ralph
takes
is
us
going
to
to
social justice.
Ralph is going to rent Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I said that was my job. That's what we'll need.
So, Lynn, as you make your way to the car to go home, today is New Year's Day. It's also the day that a new mayor is inaugurated in New York, Bill de Blasio. Have you been following politics from prison?
I get the Times, and I read New York Magazine, and etc. But I'm skeptical, but I'm hopeful at the same time. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of change that could take place. It wouldn't be maybe the kind of change I want to see, but it would be the better for all of us, I do believe.
Would you like to sit down?
Yeah, to get her moving. Let's
All right.
And that was Lynne Stewart coming home yesterday.
We love Lynn. We love.
Well, thanks again to Sally O'Brien and to Amy Goodman and Mimi Rosenberg and everyone else that was involved. And now we move into our weekly segment with
Burn Baby Burn.
Burn Baby Burn Baby. Lister.
All right.
How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing quite well. I'm really ecstatic that you broke it on Burn Baby Burn this morning on 99.1.5. That Lynne Stewart is finally out.
Yes, she is. She's I think at her son's house.